The camera panned across the studio, basking in the electric glow of applause. Stephen Colbert adjusted his cuffs with that familiar smirk, the one that had disarmed presidents and pop stars alike. But tonight, it met its match. Johnny Depp walked onto the set like a man who'd been forced to learn stillness in chaos. Black boots, faded scarf, and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept since the courtrooms closed. The crowd erupted. Stephen stood to greet him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stephen announced, "the legend himself, Johnny Depp." Johnny offered a slight nod, no wide smile, no grand gesture, just a quiet acknowledgement as he took his seat. The tension, instant, like the entire room inhaled and forgot how to exhale. "It's great to have you back," Stephen began, keeping things light. "You've been off the radar for a while." Johnny tilted his head. "Off the radar on the front page. Same difference, isn't it?" A few awkward chuckles from the audience. Stephen shifted in his chair. "We'll get into all that," he said, glancing at his cue cards. "But first, tell me, how's the music coming along? I saw you were in Paris recording with Jeff Beck before he passed." Johnny nodded. "Yeah, music doesn't lie. That's why I've been sticking with it. A guitar won't betray you on the stand." Silence again. Sharper this time. Colbert attempted a smile. "That's poetic." "No," Johnny replied, flatly. "It's true." The air thickened. This wasn't going to be a normal late-night puff piece. Not with this Johnny. This was a man who'd sat through hell's waiting room and decided he wasn't here to play anymore. Stephen tried pivoting. "So, the new film? You're playing King Louis XV. What drew you to that?" Johnny leaned in slightly. Silence. "Power! A kingdom that adored him publicly and hated him privately. Sound familiar?" Stephen blinked, the crowd murmured. Then Johnny turned to the audience, eyes scanning the studio like he was searching for someone real among them. "I've been quiet for too long," he said, voice low. "I was told to lay low, stay likable, smile more, crack a few jokes about pirates and perfume." He looked directly at Colbert. "But I'm done performing." And just like that, the room shifted. The audience leaned in. Phones came out. This wasn't the Johnny they expected. It wasn't the Johnny of press junkets or red carpets. This was the Johnny who had survived being torn apart in public and was now stitching himself back together. Live. One brutal word at a time. Colbert sat still. No punchline ready. No teleprompter. Quip to break the ice. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Johnny smiled. Just a little. But it wasn't kind. It was the smile of a man who knew he held the entire room in his hand and was daring it to blink. "Stephen," he said slowly, "for the first time in a decade, I think I am." The room didn't breathe. Stephen's smile froze mid-laugh, caught somewhere between amusement and confusion. The audience, conditioned to giggle at every cue, offered a delayed, awkward ripple of chuckles. But Johnny didn't smile. He leaned back in his chair, one arm draped lazily over the side, his eyes pinned on Colbert like he'd just handed him a loaded pistol and dared him to fire. "What do you mean?" "Realest I've ever been," Stephen asked, tilting his head. Johnny exhaled slowly. "I mean," he said, eyes scanning the studio lights above him, "every time I've sat in this chair or any other goddamn late-night throne, I've had a script in my head. Lines I rehearsed, jokes I told myself I had to laugh at, while the rest of the world played jury." The camera cut to Stephen's expression, part intrigued, part cornered. He sensed something now. This wasn't a press tour. This was something else. "You're talking about the trial," Stephen said cautiously. "Thabawi." Word trial hung in the air like cigarette smoke, uncomfortable, acrid, but impossible to ignore. Johnny nodded once. "Among other things, the tabloids turned my pain into punchlines. Friends turned into ghosts. And shows like this?" He raised his brows. "Well, they played the hits." The studio was ice cold now. Even the stage lights felt like interrogation. Lamps, Stephen adjusted his cue cards. His fingers trembled, just slightly. "Johnny," he began, "it's fair to say everyone wanted your side of the story. And tonight, you're giving it." Johnny smiled then, but it was the kind of smile that comes before a storm. "My side of the story? You think the truth has sides? Colbert, you're smarter than that." Then he turned to the audience, almost breaking the fourth wall. "You want to know what it's like?" he asked. "To be a joke in the morning papers, a meme by noon, and a pariah by dinner?" No one answered. No one could. "It's like being buried alive, while everyone argues over whether or not you deserve oxygen." A camera zoomed slowly, almost reverently, onto Depp's face. His jaw was tight, his eyes flickering with something ancient and wounded. Colbert tried again, his voice lower now. "And yet you're here, which means you're not done talking." Johnny leaned forward, elbows on knees. The edge of vulnerability in his voice was matched only by the simmering resentment behind his calm. "I'm here," he said, "because I've got nothing left to lose." The silence was shattered, not by applause, but by the audible shift in the audience's mood. Murmurs, whispers. Phones silently lifted and recording. Even in fiction, America loves a man unraveling under studio lights. Stephen cleared his throat. "So what do you want them to know? The people watching at home." Johnny looked into the camera. "I want them to know I'm not a monster. I want them to know that truth isn't what trends on Twitter. It's not a hashtag. It's not what your PR team can spin into a soundbite. It's a slow, bleeding wound that nobody wants to look at." A beat passed. Then two. Stephen broke the moment. "I think a lot of people would say this version of you, raw, unfiltered, is exactly what we needed. That we never really knew you." Depp shook his head. "You still don't," he whispered. "And maybe you never will." The audience was no longer an audience. They were spectators at a gladiator match where the only weapon was confession. The band hadn't played in 10 minutes, and for once, Stephen Colbert was out of jokes. For a few long seconds, the studio stood in complete stillness. Colbert, the cameras, the crowd, even the stage lights seemed to dim under the weight of what Johnny had just said. Then Stephen leaned forward with a half laugh, trying to reclaim control. "Well, you've still got that flair for dramatic timing," he joked. "You might have missed your true calling as a playwright." Johnny didn't laugh. Instead, he turned to the camera. Directly, deliberately. "No script," he said. "Not tonight." Colbert blinked. His producers shifted nervously in the background. This wasn't in the pre-interview. This wasn't part of the deal. "They told me not to name names," Johnny continued. "Told me to move on, take the roles I was offered, thank the studios that left me out to dry. Smile, nod, be grateful." He paused. "But I won't." The crowd gasped. Colbert's smile was gone. This wasn't an interview anymore. This was a reckoning. Johnny reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't theatrical, it was surgical. "I wrote something down. A few names. People who weren't in the courtroom but were just as guilty." Colbert held up a hand, clearly trying to stop whatever was coming next. "Johnny, I don't think this is the Warner Brothers," Johnny said. Colbert froze, dropped me before the verdict, before a single statement from me. No evidence, no hearing, just fear of backlash. "They didn't care about truth, they cared about trending," the audience murmured. Some clapped, others looked stunned. "Disney," Johnny added, almost as an afterthought. "Same story. Years of box office gold, billions made, gone with a headline." Colbert coughed nervously. "Johnny, these are major corporations. Are you sure you want to—" "I'm not accusing," Johnny interrupted. "I'm remembering." A beat. He looked down at the paper. There was a moment. March 2020. A studio executive texted my agent. "He's radioactive. Drop him." I never forgot that line, not because it hurt, but because it revealed something. He turned to Colbert. "Hollywood doesn't cancel people because they're guilty. It cancels them because they're inconvenient." Now the crowd was fully quiet. No laughter, no applause, just a slow, rising tension that crackled like static. Stephen tried again, his voice tight. "Johnny, don't you think, maybe, this could have been handled differently, off camera?" Johnny's reply was calm. Too calm. "They ruined me on camera. Why shouldn't I answer them the same way?" Stephen looked away for a moment, scratching his chin. Then, with visible effort, he pivoted. "So, is this revenge or closure?" Johnny tilted his head. "It's a reminder," he folded the paper and slid it back into his pocket, "that the truth doesn't need permission." Then he looked directly into the lens. "To the ones who watched me fall and stayed silent. To the ones who cheered. I see you. I remember you. And I'm not done." Stephen opened his mouth, but no words came. This wasn't just a late-night interview anymore. It was history. The instant the cameras cut to commercial, chaos erupted behind the scenes. Producers scrambled. Earpieces buzzed like angry hornets. One assistant whispered frantically into a headset, while another paced near the curtain, mouthing a silent prayer. Stephen Colbert sat frozen in his chair, blinking into the lights as if they might offer answers. "Johnny?" Johnny just leaned back. Calm, still, unmoved. A stage manager rushed up to Colbert. "Do we cut the next segment? Do we go back on air, or—" Colbert snapped out of it, brushing the air. "No, we go on." "But the network—" "I said we go on." He turned to Johnny with something between admiration and alarm. "You just blew up the internet. That wasn't an interview. That was a live detonation." Johnny gave a half smile. "Funny. You invited the pirate, then acted shocked when I didn't follow the map." Colbert exhaled sharply, then stood up and walked off stage toward his dressing room. Cameras were still rolling in the hallway now, unofficially. Someone on the crew had started filming with their phone. Already it would be circulating online. The backstage corridor was tense, thick with the kind of silence only major reputational damage can bring. Johnny followed slowly. His boots echoed. Behind him, a network executive burst through the hallway doors with a tablet in hand. "Stephen, we need to talk now," she said, her voice clipped. "We're trending #1, everywhere. Hashtags like Depp Unleashed and our Colbert ambush are exploding. Sponsors are already calling. Colbert didn't even turn around. Let them. We just made TV history." But the exec wasn't impressed. This wasn't authorized. He deviated from every cue. "You were supposed to talk about the indie film. Not this vendetta tour?" Johnny turned around. "Vendetta?" He stepped closer to her. "When you're told to disappear, and the world claps when you do, that's not a vendetta. That's survival. I just stopped pretending I owe silence to people who fed on my ruin." The executive faltered for a moment, then stiffened. "The legal team will need to review the segment. We may have to cut—" "Cut what?" Johnny interrupted. "The truth." Colbert stepped between them, sensing the heat. "You can't cut what's already viral," he said quietly. "That moment is out there, and people aren't looking away this time." The exec scowled but walked away without another word. Johnny stared down the hallway, then turned to Colbert. "You still sure this was worth it?" Stephen gave a tired chuckle. "Not sure yet, but I'll let you know when the Emmy nominations come out." They shared a glance. Not friendship, not forgiveness, but a strange mutual respect. Johnny moved toward the exit door at the end of the hallway. Just before stepping out, he turned. "They thought I was finished. They told me to move quietly." He smiled. "I chose loud." The door closed behind him. A second later, the backstage crew watched the internet explode. Every phone lit up. Headlines, clips, comments. The pirate hadn't sunk. He had just taken the ship back. By 7 a.m. the next morning, CBS headquarters in New York was a fortress under siege, the glass building that usually glittered with quiet. Confidence now throbbed with media vans, angry calls from PR agents, and executives gulping down burnt coffee like it was jet fuel. Floor 18, the top floor, had been transformed into a digital war room. Every wall was a screen, tweets, YouTube reactions, international news channels, even clips from rival networks replaying the moment Johnny Depp turned a late-night comedy show into a battleground. A red headline blinked on one of the screens. Depp versus Colbert, the interview that shook Hollywood. Stephen Colbert walked in, black coat, no tie, eyes dark from lack of sleep. The room went quiet. At the head of the long boardroom table sat Marianne Leeds, Senior Vice President of Programming. Her expression was carved from ice. "Stephen," she said flatly. "Sit." He did, calmly. No jokes. This wasn't a taping. This was judgment. Marianne gestured to the screen. "Explain what happened last night." Stephen shrugged. An actor, a microphone, and a truth no one wanted aired. That about sums it up. A man from legal, buttoned up, expressionless, cut in. He named names. He mentioned lawsuits. And he alluded to blacklists and internal conversations that could legally expose us. "He didn't name this network," Colbert countered. "He didn't have to," Marianne said coldly. "People are connecting the dots already. And some of those dots lead to our door." Another executive, from marketing, chimed in. "But the numbers? They're staggering. Overnight, we hit 84 million views across all platforms. Advertisers are pissed, but new sponsors are circling. There it was, the bottom line." Stephen leaned forward. "So what's the problem?" He said what everyone whispers. He just did it, with cameras on. Marianne narrowed her eyes. "The problem is control. That seat is yours, but the show is ours. If this becomes precedent, we lose the steering wheel." Stephen exhaled. "Maybe it's time the car drove itself. You wanted ratings? You got an earthquake." Silence. Then someone in PR flipped a new screen. A viral clip. Depp saying, "I chose loud." Below it, a million comments. Finally, someone speaks truth. This is what cancel culture never saw coming. Colbert just got depped. Marianne looked tired. Beaten, even. "We need to do something. Damage control." "Like what?" Colbert asked. "Apologize for giving a man 5 minutes to speak his truth?" "No," she said quietly. "We double down. Every head turned. We turn it into a mini-series. Depp, The Reckoning. You host. He picks the guests. You talk to others who've been burned. People want blood, but they'll settle for stories." Stephen blinked. Even for him, this was unexpected. "You're serious?" "Deadly." "And Depp?" Marianne smirked. Already reached out, he said, "Only if we don't edit a damn thing." Stephen leaned back in his chair, processing it all. This wasn't just fallout. This was the start of a revolution, a camera-ready one.